Hi, Kevin. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast. We always start with the same first question, which is, what is the hardest change that's happened to you in your life?
Well, I think naturally I had what was a very unfortunate stroke, and I've tried to sort of the other day I released a video on LinkedIn just to give people a bit of an impression how my life has most probably changed from the guy they remembered and how sort of immediate and impactful such an illness can be. I mean, physically, a lot has changed, for a guy that was very, you know, fitness minded and healthy, it was a big shock to me. I'm gradually coming to terms with that. I think you go through a lot of grief within a stroke recovery process because you feel naturally you've lost the old person you remember. So, change wise, I mean, I'm employed, I've got a job, which has been fascinating. I'm finally being managed by someone.
And how are you finding that?
Um, so I'm learning a lot. My life has changed. I've had to sort of re-gear my purposes, everything, my goals, everything has changed personally for me.
Okay, so do you feel like a different person since that happened?
I do. If I look at the person that, let's go back now, 9, 10 months ago, I didn't know if that person would ever come back.
Mm.
I look at that guy, I look at old videos in my recovery process, and I'm incredibly proud of that guy. It's been a heck of a journey for me and all of my loved ones that have been involved in this. So yeah, I think as a person, I look at that. I think in life you sometimes question who are you, and I've learned that I was the person I thought I was, which is quite a nice place to be in my life, really.
Yeah, I think obviously looking, like I'll listen to your stroke stories episode about, how that happened. And a bit for me that I wanted to ask you a bit more about was, and we'll come on to onto the business side of it afterwards and work life. But the bit that, struck with me was when you said about that you came home and your home became a barrier to you.
Yeah,
And how did what sort of happened? How did you
yeah,
learn
yeah.
to learn to get around?
I mean, I was terrified of my house. I came back in quite an ill state, I would say. Physically, I was unable to walk. I couldn't get up the stairs. Every small movement. I think I made it clear in my Stroke Stories podcast. I had obviously quite a traumatic head injury, and I was living life getting around those barriers. I'd been learned to made to feel that if I didn't have my white helmet on, then you were at a serious risk of falling over. So things were I was so scared for both me and my wife. It was we had to get around that fear barrier and just take things on. And you most probably, as I say, I learned that inside myself there is quite a brave, courageous guy, really. So yeah, that was the main thing: getting past that fear, just embracing it.
You talk about the silly white helmet that you had to
Yeah,
wear.
a silly
Um,
white helmet. God,
like,
yeah,
and I guess like trying to get back to normal. I mean, you've always struck me, Kevin, as someone that um doesn't really care what people think of him. You drive your own path.
yeah.
Was that the same or?
Oh, sorry, Gav, that broke up just there. You have to repeat that bit.
That's okay. I was going to say you sort of you always struck me as someone that didn't really care what people thought of them, but then
Yeah.
you made a point that you had to wear a silly white helmet. Was it for 8 months, something like that?
Yeah, I mean that was a long period of my life. Gee, crikey. That helmet is will I mean it's I'm gonna frame it one day. I mean everything I did, if I wanted to move across the room, I had to put a helmet on. I became, my identity associated to that helmet. And I think you're right, Gareth. I've tried to in life, I've tried to be as black and white in my nature as possible. I like, people sound quite honest in the way I am. I've tend not to be fussed what people think of me. I am what I am, and I learned this. this period of my life has taught me you are what you are. Who cares? When you've been in hospital for 7 weeks, you get used to people seeing every part of you.
Yeah. And the other thing that struck me was when you and Laura, your wife, made a pact never to fall out about anything that happened. How did that go?
I mean, fair play to my wife. Laura is my absolute hero. I mean, you couldn't ask for somebody to sacrifice more than what Laura has for me. She defended me at exactly the right times in my life. And really, while I was ill, she stood up at a point that was running the business by herself in one sense when her husband wasn't able to run the business. We laughed. We had to take some form of humility in it all, really. It was our way of getting through the tough times, I think. We've definitely fallen out. I still leave the keys in the wrong place. I think that's a natural part of a relationship, isn't it? I still leave the toilet seat open up.
Yeah, I guess that'll never change.
Yeah.
So, going to go back to the beginning. Well, what I think is the beginning. You graduated from Reading after reading politics and international relations, and then you went into recruiting surveyors. How did that happen?
I don't know. I think politics, by all about 3 years of working on a degree, I've somehow landed in recruitment. I wouldn't change that in my life. I think recruitment became the bright lights of the world, be a millionaire tomorrow type thing. And I've always had a sense of opportunism. And recruitment matched well for me. I've always liked business. I've always liked the concept of if you can match two things together, you can make hay from it, really. My dad was incredibly entrepreneurial. He was an opportunity finder in life, and I learned so much from him. And I think I always wanted to prove, I suppose it's a classic, I wanted to prove to him that I could be the person he thought I was. So recruitment was really right for me. It's a hard-working industry. Those who tend to work hardest succeed the most. It's relationship building, people. I love people. I love talking to people. I was fortunate I could talk to people, understand them. I think people who know me and have worked with me from a recruitment perspective know I've always had an empathetic side to me. I like listening to people's stories in life, and that's how I landed in recruitment, placing surveyors, which God knows I had at that point, that was the classic 20-year-old trying to sort of work out what does a surveyor do, and I actually did work it out in
the end. So correct me if I'm wrong here. 2012, you then decided I'm going to go on my own.
I did.
Talk to me about that.
That was 2012. I was working for a big global recruiter called Michael Page. I'd learned so much, and I'd always felt in recruitment, recruiters were seen in a certain light. And I fundamentally believe we added value to organizations. And I wanted to prove that, really. Maybe starting up on your own is never the greatest idea. But something happened in my life, which was in 2012, that at that moment made me realize, and I'm only learning now, that life is quite short. And I just decided I didn't want to live this moment without regrets. If I didn't do this, I didn't want to go through life regretting some of the things I'd done or decisions. So I handed my notice in and went off and started what was at the time the Property Recruitment Company.
So were you on your own at that point, or did you invite others to join you, or right at the very beginning?
Actually, I was fortunate that two guys I had known from a previous path in my career decided they wanted to maybe collaborate. So I joined in with them in a partnership, and they helped me sort of scale up the business as it was. Was
it classic startup, all huddled around the table, or did you manage to, scale up a bit quicker than that?
Oh, I was clueless. Yeah, I didn't know what I was doing. I suppose in life you can think you're as good as the brand. I'd worked for big branded companies. You can think you're as good as you are, but then the minute you leave a recruitment company and try and start it somewhere else, you're tendedly not the people will go, well, why would we work with you? And I was trying to sort of sell a concept that was me on a mobile phone. And I learned, I was learning, I've always believed what was my proposition. My background was working with affordable housing organisations. How did I get into student? Well, that's a classic case, really. I think one day I found out that CRM students were hiring for an accommodation manager. So I phoned up the human resources manager. Unfortunately, she gave me this opportunity. Kevin, can you find me an accommodation manager? And I learned so quickly. I was like, no one in this sector is telling people they do student accommodation. And I was like, great, I'm going to be able to, that's it. I'm going to try and do this. So I sort of focused all my efforts I became like into student accommodation, learning all the sort of managing agents that were out there, trying to connect with the regional managers, trying to build a talent pool of general managers. And from there, really, it sort of, I was in the right place at the right time. We saw all this international money coming into the markets, and titans were coming in, and organizations are growing so quickly. It was hectic. So that's how we sort of landed in student. Was through that more than anything.
That's funny. Like my first job in PBSA was as an accommodation manager for CRM students, funnily enough. So that's not recruited by you, Kevin, but yeah, so it was I listened to your episode of the Resilient Recruiter podcast back in 2020, I think. And you said that one of your main missions, perhaps I should call it, is daring to be different.
Yes.
So how do you think you went about being different to everyone? I know at the beginning you were the only people really doing PBSA recruitment, but how did you make yourselves different to every other recruiter that was out there?
Yeah, I think I realized that knowledge is the most powerful thing you can have, really. So I spent hours into evenings just learning about student accommodation, reading all the market research insights. And I wanted to be able to, if clients were to, or employers were to call me with a requirement, that the different part was I knew how the sector worked. I knew everything about it. I felt like my knowledge was really powerful. And actually, interestingly, student accommodation, the buildings, they're always as good as the people. It's a very what's the word? Like, it's very much about the person that is inside the building and their character and nature. And I became frustrated that I think in life too much was being taken from a CV. And so we started with the front of desk piece. Well, we got a camera out on an iPhone and started getting people to film videos for us. And loading them up to a YouTube channel and sending them to organizations saying, here you go, here's a YouTube channel of some candidates, please look. So that was our start in trying to be different, like giving people some exposure to candidate videos.
So at the beginning of personal branding, I guess. You were right at the forefront of getting people to record videos. And yeah. I guess you were trying to, I think, sort of eliminate some of the headaches of those first stage interviews where you've got candidate after candidate and you're asking them set questions, right?
I know. I feel sorry for employers a lot of times when really it's the classic case of recruiters. You cost loads of money, you're expensive, your fees. And what employers never account for is the cost of wastage in running recruitment processes themselves. Management time, the panel, people coming in, all of that. And then the leakage in cost just baffled me, really. I was like, you're wasting all of your time. You're meeting people and going, they're not right for you. But how have you assessed them at the very beginning to make sure that you're aware of what and then you're going to put a management team in to do an interview process. So I tried to think of ways of taking cost out of the picture, which I felt the video was more efficient. In a marketplace that is national, European, people are on the move all the time. What's the easiest way to look at people, physically get on a video and watch someone portray themselves?
I guess that's it's sort of on-demand recruiting almost, isn't it? You don't have to coordinating diaries is often the hardest bit, isn't it?
I know. I mean, you get used to the on-demand piece. A manager wins a contract, and then they're on site the next day, and you're sort of on-demand recruiter.
And everywhere I go within the sector, I see alumni of the Property Recruitment Company, yeah, including some previous guests on this podcast. Yeah. So you must be proud to see people going out there and forging their careers, having learnt the industry with you.
Yeah, look, I'm incredibly proud. I always wanted to leave a bit of a footprint in the sector. And I see recruiters now who are in organizations delivering services to employers, and it's great that they've come through my stable in one sense. I'm very proud of all those individuals who have been. I listen to them on this podcast, and I'm just amazed at their sense of how they've grown as people. So yeah, definitely feel like I've started what was the recruitment industry within, I suppose, real estate operations.
I definitely think you did that. And if there's some of the best moments you look back on from Property Recruitment Company, is there something that sticks out in your mind?
I think when we've helped organisations to mobilise, I'll always be proud of some of the placement. I think personally, I look at some of the people I've placed into the industry, and I've seen how their careers have grown. And I'm just really humbled by the fact that people who at that moment in time decided to take not a punt in one sense and joining a business. And I think seeing their growth and having had a touch point with them, definitely proud that we delivered services into Europe and recruited for assets into Europe. I think, yeah, we changed the way things were done, I believe personally. So yeah, really, I think I have a massive sense of pride in seeing the alumni.
So I guess following having the stroke last year, as a business owner, your business never stops.
Yes.
So what happened? Obviously you're in hospital for some time. What was going on at the Property Recruitment Company when obviously you were, looking after yourself, trying to get better?
Yeah, I think that was the challenge in it all, really. Obviously, when the leader leaves the business, there's no succession plan. I was really ill, and I think from that perspective, it was trying to gauge. No one knows in this journey how long's he out for. It's not like I've broken my leg and I can return. It's technically, without being extreme, it is a brain injury. So your brain is trying to heal, and in that you're trying to work out from your own sense of self, where are you at? And at that point, I totally didn't know where I was at. My life was sort of felt like it was spiraling out of control. And yeah, I think that was the toughest part. Is I'd hoped that there would be some form of protection, really, and people would stick in it with me and help me. And I didn't feel that was coming at the
time. So did you go back at all, or did it just finish?
So that's a fascinating. Yeah, it fit. Well, it finished early at the end of this year, which was gutting.
Yeah.
I mean, people sort of made decisions to leave the business, which didn't really help my predicament. I was still very much. I mean, at that point, my wife was still hoisting me into a shower and trying to get me pushed around a house in a wheelchair. So I was a bit stuck on my own. I'd always been quite a visual guy in my presence. I'd always made sure that I could be at the office, etc. So being away from the business, especially when stakeholders are leaving, is never a good place. And I remember there was a point where I was just like, this was probably the worst. I would be open, the worst moment in my life. I'd made the decision. I need to get to the office. I need to go and see everyone and sort of give if I can, a bit of a rallying cry. So I travelled to the office through central London with my wife. I was on the way there. I hadn't been in a car for nearly 4 months at this point, so I was being sick. I was so anxious. I got to the office. I was in my bloody white helmet. Got everyone into a room and sort of said, "Look, we can." I genuinely felt I've never given up. I was like, "We can get through this." sort of left hoping that I think people may have seen my predicament and gone, actually, we need to look after him, I suppose. I mean, I was desperate to get back to work. I always have been. Work was my life. I mean, property recruitment company, there wasn't a minute I wouldn't think about it. I returned back home, and then the next morning I woke up to go sort of start the journey of guiding the business through what was troubled waters. And I had a period where I spent most of that morning dealing with people handing their notices into me, which I was like, yeah, that was the toughest part. Everyone decided to really, after doing that, I've decided to leave me and do other things, which
Yeah.
meant the business at that point was really, the business recruitment is as good as the people. So once people are starting to leave you, the business was really in a position where it couldn't be run anymore. And I was left really on my recovery bed trying to work out the next steps, and really made the active decision with my wife that it wouldn't be fair on me and my health to try and salvage the company back to what it was. What I will particularly say is, in that time of disarray, there were some true heroes in there that I felt gutted that I had to let them go, who stood by me. And I mean, from my family's perspective, listened into a lot of calls that they were involved in. They generally would, shake all of their hands. They know who they are. And I truly thank them for sticking by me at what was a very tough time for everyone.
Yeah, it does sound tough. And I guess,
Yeah.
are you still in touch with those people, with lots of those people from those days, the people that stood by you?
The older alumni, yes. I mean, I say his name, James Housden. I will always say in James, I have a respect for that guy, and I'm proud of what he's achieved. I think he's brilliant. And I mean, James brought the best out in me and always has done. We've always been competitive with each other. And yeah, bar that, no, I haven't. I think I've decided to take myself away from that, really.
That makes sense. But you're back employed. You've started something new recently.
Yeah. So I've joined the Oyster Partnership. And that's really, as I love the sectors I work in, I didn't want to stop that. There were really two options to me: go alone, do it yourself, or find somebody who might be interested in backing an opportunity. And really, I met with the MD at the time, Sasha, and what is my boss, Rob Murray, and we decided that that was an area they had felt there was some capability. So I've really joined them to deliver a real estate operations business, which has been enjoyable.
Firing up the old network again and getting back to what you know.
Yeah, getting back to what I know. I mean, for me, recovery is talking to people who are in the sector doing what I love talking about. It's a sector of gossip, which is great.
Well, I couldn't have you on the podcast without picking your brains about the sectors you work in.
Yeah.
So PBSA, you saw it when it was back in the day, when it was needing investment, shall we say. So now it's got to certain maturity. IQ's been transacted, Student Roost has, Unite isn't going anywhere. Where's the sector heading now?
I'm fascinated. I could spend hours. This is a beer for me, but I don't believe I'm an econometrician. I think we're in. I think the sector's in a state of challenge, in my opinion. I think we're seeing a rehype of student. There's a demand in student for assets, and clearly that's quite a way off. From a development perspective, I think the biggest challenge is the operators will struggle. We've got massive issues with inflation. We've got a cost of living crisis, which naturally impacts salary inflation, which from the operator mindset, I think we're moving into seeing the challenge. They will face natural challenges in that. I think I worked in recruitment when I don't want to be doom and gloom, but when it was I worked in a public sector business that went through a recession, and I feel like I'm seeing, my experience is showing me some signs of how that happened. it's fast growth operating platforms are tending to find a catch now. I think underwrites are becoming massively challenging for budgets and salaries, which ultimately, if you're underinvested on the salary side, you're compromising your services. So I think we might hit a stagnation. I'm speaking to more investors who are saying, look, should we build our own platform? You're seeing business operations look at cost saving now, and I saw this 10 years ago where organized big housing associations decided to save costs. They insource their labor organizations that were delivering maintenance services. And I think we're going to see more platforms come out. And we've seen IQ and Roost had their own platforms. I think we're going to see a change in that dynamic. I think clients will start seeing if they can build out operating platforms.
So those operating in the third party space, should they be concerned about investors moving away or new operators coming up?
I think for me, I would always say to the investor, if it looks too good on paper, work it out. I tendally think that from an operator mindset, you are crucially driven by growth. Okay, it's a cash flow business. You've got to keep growing your operating platform, winning mobilization projects, keep funding growth. And I think once we start getting into the world where operators are at a cheaper price to other operators, I'd honestly say to investors, like, question that value for money part now, because it could, if it to run an operating platform, you've got to fund it through profit, and we don't really want not profits. As salary inflation impacts businesses and costs rise, you sort of don't want that correction to occur.
I guess another sector we talk a lot about is build to rent, yes, which obviously is still in its infancy in a way. Yeah. So who do you think are going to be dominant? Is there going to be a dominant player emerge in build to rent?
I think it's down to the management companies, really. I think dominance is driven by the management companies. I think as an external coming into the sector 11 months, genuinely native are coming up a lot in those conversations. They seem to be on point with their branding and building operations. So I mean, the sector, if it's like student, and build to rent would hate me keep saying student, it needs new financing to come in. As soon as new funding comes in, that tends to be the dominant player. We saw it with Greystar a long time ago in the UK. We saw it like, I think it's now just seeing who makes the decisive move into the UK market. They could likely be the titan. So yeah, I think big raises will be the new dominant player, and then it comes down to who is the best delivering management agent.
I guess in terms of something that we've spoken on this podcast before, and I'd be keen to get your opinion on it, is around clients in the build to rent sector wanting people with build to rent experience. Are there enough of them out there, and is that going to cause them a problem down the line?
Well, no. I think I've seen sectors grow quickly and hit the catch where talent starts to cost businesses too much, and that has an on cost. Okay, it's a supply and demand situation. I've always believed businesses need to really gauge what are they looking for, and take away the easiest thing in anything is skill matching. My job is somebody pays me a fee to go and find someone. Okay, my job becomes null and void if I don't put the human part in it. I can skill match people all day. They have done X, they have done Y, they match. But culture is the crucial part. People who are going to stay in your organization and add value to your culture. Retention is your key, really. So I think the sourcing of talent is going to be a challenge. I saw Nick say it's potentially car crash territory. I don't think he's wrong in that estimation. I think there's still a lot of fundamental things that companies have got to work out in what they're looking for.
Where are they? Where are they? What sectors are they going to find these people in?
I think short-term build to rent with the assets that are proposed to launch, that there'll be growth. And I don't think I think in student it's fairly static at this point. I don't think there's much demand. I think build to rent will most probably be challenged. It's, we're looking at a marketplace that was, I say, underwritten maybe 3 years ago, and we're driving at salary inflation of 7% in the last 10 years. I think it's been. So stuff that was done 5 years ago is wrong to what is today. So to get the best talent, you just would hope that you've got an affordable, I say affordable budget, but an opportunity to make your business the most enticing it can be.
I guess another sector I want to talk to you about is co-living. That gets talked about a lot.
Yes.
I mean, has anyone successfully described co-living yet, exactly what it is? And do you think it will ever take off in the UK?
I don't know. I mean, I've just done a project on a co-living building. And it fascinates me. I've been around co-living sites and what is deemed to be co-living, and I've sat there and gone, how is this co-living? I mean, if someone can nail that term, it's like the world of acronyms: BTR, PBSA, co-living. I think that's always been these sectors' biggest challenges, is describing what are they. Community is the big word. I just think that I couldn't personally. I'd most probably come up with an answer that is wrong to a co-living asset owner. They'd say no. That's not in the vein of how I would describe co-living. I mean, Rick Tasario would give you a good explanation of gravity, most probably.
And well, you like spotting a niche before it's going to grow. I wondered whether you were excited about recruiting into the co-living space.
I think it's a hard one, co-living, because it needs to be attractive, in my opinion. I think the buildings are, when you're trying to find people to go into those buildings, explaining it is a co-living is no different to explaining it's a build-to-rent asset. So I think the proposition has to be right to make it interesting. God, I think there's a lot of niche opportunities growing at the moment. I think it's clear to see out there where people are always trying to find where's the next place to put their money. And really, I think it's clear that the senior living market has a massive play, highly undersupplied from that perspective. Unclear on what that proposition is, unlike co-living, really, and what is that proposition going to be. So I would see that as the more opportunistic marketplace right now.
And an acronym, and throw another acronym at you, one that I don't really like: single family housing.
Oh God.
Is that gonna take off? It seems to be what everyone's talking about on LinkedIn at the moment.
I know. I think there's some first movers in it that have grasped it and get what the proposition is. I think we're seeing Sigma really understand what their proposition is going to be. Look, the world technically needs it. We're in an unaffordable housing market, and there are families that need housing provision. So hopefully someone can get it right. And if they can, they're going to do very well at it from a lending perspective, I would have thought.
I was thinking how, with land costs and build costs, what they are, like, I always wonder how you could get a decent return in single family housing. Maybe there's some cleverer people out there than me that can work that out. But it strikes me as, the sector's done well out of, look at PBSA, cluster flats, less studios now, but cluster flats, pile it high, and keep your staffing costs relatively low. Whereas the single family housing market seems to be quite, I'd like to see how they make a return in that sector.
Yeah, it's fascinating that. I mean, with the land costs and how you're sourcing land to deliver and planning, etc. It's trying to keep those costs right, and then at the beginning, getting the costs right for the future projections.
Clearly, you love recruitment.
Yeah.
If somebody wanted to get into recruitment now, would you say do it or or not?
I think recruitment is the best learning place you can ever have. Okay. You become in recruitment, you're a consultant, you become your own island. You've got to learn. All right. You've got to deal with rejection. You've got to deal with learning to be an expert as much as you can provide for. You've got to deal with people. People have brains. Brains change minds on a regular basis. So you've got to learn how to work with people, understand people's needs and wants. Listen is the crucial part. I would, if I was young again, would I? And somebody said, Kevin, this is going to be your life story. Would you go and do it again? I'll do it all again. It's allowed me to achieve what I've always wanted to achieve. So I wouldn't. I love the industry. I love recruitment, and I won't be. I wanted to end my career in recruitment. I hope I will be ending my career in recruitment.
So, you've just turned 40. You're a young man. What's next?
Cheers, Gareth. What's next? I mean, there's milestones anywhere, really. If I can get into a position where Oyster becomes, I would hope, a brand of understanding in this sector, that's great for me. I would like to build Oyster a proposition that I think is relevant to the market, and we can help clients grow their businesses in the right way, which is cost efficient and with the right people. So what's next? Carry on doing what I love.
And I saw you put a quote on LinkedIn that I wanted to ask you about, which I found interesting. And you said there are good people and there are bad people out there. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time.
Yeah, I think life teaches it that, really. I'd always hoped that I was quite a good person. I felt in my life, I look back on Property Recruitment Company and my own story. I don't think I've ever not done everything I can to help others. And I think you're right. That's a good question. I just think I've seen the best and worst of humanity in my eyes. I tell that to a lot of people in people's actions, really. And I think once you can see these things, know them. People, they say leopards don't change their spots.
And you joined Oyster Partnership because you felt that they would understand the journey that you were on and be able to work with you to get the best out of you. And how have they done that, and how would you advise other employers to be able to do that?
Yeah, I would like to think, and I will put it on here, if any employer has a scenario where there is a returner to work, I've had the best and worst experience of that. And I would safely say in Oyster, my boss has been phenomenal. I think he's genuinely, I think it's easy to look at me or in one way with a stroke and go, he's okay. He's fine. He can do it. And my boss has really just invested in me, put the effort in, and tried to teach the old dog new tricks, much to his frustration, I would have thought. But I think it's about, I've always been very clear on this. If I can play my part in, trying to help what is the disabled community in a transition to the workforce. I spoke to, at the time, which was the ex-CEO of Michael Page, and he actually had a skiing accident and was quadriplegic, and is running a huge campaign behind the scenes of trying to create workforces to access true talent. I would just say that it's a challenging thing. Everybody is the same. We all have the same fundamental needs. We want security, we want clarity. And I think that's where Oyster have sort of stood away from that and been brilliant. I think they've really actually embraced me as one of them. And that's all I really ever asked
for. So in terms, we're on to quick fire round questions now. So, if you could change one thing about the world, what would it be?
Oh, good question. I haven't done that in my prep. If I could change one thing in the world, what would it be? I think it's about a world that is I have learned to be fair, really. I think I learned being in a wheelchair, there is naturally, and forgive me, an unconscious bias out there, really. And I would hope that we can all work together to sort of extinguish that, really. So I think a world that is fair to others and that, treat people with respect.
What advice would you give to someone who wants to change their direction but doesn't know where to start?
Um, I mean, again, I go back to one thing. I think I have massively changed my direction in life. Okay, it's gone to the roundabout, and I've turned around it, and I've changed it. Openly invest in yourself. Okay, if you want to experience, you've got to taking, I say a cut in a salary. And that is your investment in yourself. If you want to start something and you're passionate, go do that. Make the change. I've never regretted any change I've made. It's taught me the best things I've ever learned, really.
What's going to be your next big change?
I'll repeat that, Gareth. Sorry.
What's going to be your next big change?
Um, I think my next big change is going to be hopefully in recovery. That's my focus. That is a change in, for me personally, physically, a lot of things have changed. I hope that my walking improves. My next big change is trying to build something that means something to me, which I hope I can do at Oyster Partnership.
I was going to say that sort of came to mind. Really, is
Yeah.
would you ever go back to running your own business again?
It's the hardest job in the world. I've got a lot of respect for independent business owners. The stress, the unwavering, like, am I doing that? You constantly you're isolated, you'll question yourself in so many ways. I don't think I'd want to go. I personally don't think I would start a business again. I've not got plans at all to go back to being my own business. I'm thankfully in an environment where I'm protected from the stresses of what running a business is. I've seen my boss, and I know that the pressure. He thrives in that environment. I used to. You've got to be a certain character to thrive in that fight or survive mode.
Okay. If you were to recommend a guest for me to speak to on the podcast, who would it be and why?
So I would say Paul Watson at now. I think he's got exciting things happening. It would be great to get his take on what's going on. Rachel Hanneke Brooking at Appo. I think she's got a different sense of and different perspective on things. And honestly, Paddy from Cushman, Paddy Allen, I think he's very well measured in what is happening within the market and its forces. He's real estate operations. I think he's great. And Joe Pericino, very, very good global perspective, I would say, on these alternative investment markets.
Well, some great recommendations there. We'll certainly reach out to them and hopefully get some more episodes. And yeah, I guess lastly, I know from your LinkedIn posts that you've been putting out about your recovery and your journey so far that there's a lot of people that wish you well out there in your recovery, and just where are you physically with your recovery, and hopefully it's all going in a positive direction.
Yeah, so physically at the moment, I mean, I look back on a lot of times when I get stressed or depressed about where things are at. I go back to my recovery diary, which I took throughout my time in hospital, and I realize how much more I've moved on. I think physically, I'm capable to a certain extent. I'm fortunate I can walk. I was a big walker in my life, so I'm able to get around. I think, as I say, I put the video on LinkedIn. I think people can see now I'm up. I still have some deficits in my left arm. That is still non-functional, so I'm living a life with one arm. there's no written sort of proposal on if that's going to come back. I work hard every day in the hope that it will, and if it does, then the next stage will be getting that to a functional point.
That's good to hear. And I just wanted to say thanks, Kevin, for joining me on the podcast. I've certainly been following your posts and listening to your podcast. Really inspiring story, and I know there's so many people out there that will probably be back in touch, hopefully, now that you're back at the Oyster Partnership, because they could certainly do worse things than picking up the phone to you and trying to get you to find them some talent. So yeah, thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, don't worry, mate.
Sorry, I pressed the wrong button. Do it again, I'll cut it, don't worry.
So I'd just like to say, Gareth, on that note, I'd like to thank everyone who reached out to me in what was the toughest part of my life, and the people who came and visited me from afar that were previous employers. I thank you truly, and please reach out to me. Okay, I'm an open book here. I will tell anyone what they need to know. If I can help someone avoid this case, I would happily talk to someone. So please reach out to me. But thank you very much for letting me come on. All right.
Great. Thanks, Kevin.